We're either going to become empowered as a species to really be the masters of our own destiny and use artificial intelligence to solve all the problems we've been stumped by so far, or we're going to go extinct.
I think you have said that when it comes to AI, we're not in an arms race. It's actually a suicide race. Where you think we're headed and why everyone needs to pay attention to this now.
The worst case scenario is lights out for all of us. Why was it that GPT-J seemingly persuaded a Belgian man recently to commit suicide, or that another chatbot tried to convince a New York Times journalist to leave his wife? It was not because some engineer involved in building it was like, ha ha ha, I'm gonna mess with these people. No, it's just they had no idea it was gonna do these things. They're gigantic black boxes. Pressing the start button is basically like playing Russian roulette. That's why the biggest threat right now, I think, is instead coming from the private market, where everybody is just trying to make more money. You can make a lot of money on things in the short term, even if you don't understand how they work.
There's no history on this planet of a less intelligent being ever either surviving or having any type of reality that they used to have. There's a good argument to say this is really important to stay aware of.
If we're up against something more intelligent and it wants to get rid of us, it'll be in a way that we can't even imagine. And probably for a reason also that we can't imagine. If we get this right, there's just an enormous upside. So if we can amplify our intelligence with artificial intelligence, it's just mind-boggling how amazing things we could do. Where people can live healthy, wealthy, inspiring lives in a world where AI just helps bring out the best in us.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is... This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Professor Max Tegmark, the cosmologist, physicist, and artificial intelligence expert. You have spent the last 20 years as a professor in the Department of Physics at MIT and have published more than 200 technical papers. In 2017, you wrote the best-selling book, Life 3.0, Being Human in the Age of Artificial Intelligence. Here, you explored how the rise of AI has the potential to transform our future more than any other technology in history. You're also the co-founder and president of the Future of Life Institute, a nonprofit organization with the goal of reducing global catastrophic and existential risks facing humanity. Just recently, the Institute drafted a letter calling on major AI developers to agree to a 6-month pause of any systems more powerful than ChatGPT-4. You believe that AI development is moving faster than anticipated, and we need a serious public debate regarding AI's potential impact on humanity. Max, welcome to London Real.
Thank you.
Great to have you on here. I'm going to jump into it. I think you have said that when it comes to AI, we're not in an arms race. It's actually a suicide race. And I was wondering if you could tell me the state of AI right now, where you think we're headed, and why everyone needs to pay attention to this now.
Yeah, great question. So let's unpack it a little bit by bit there. After 13.8 billion years of cosmic history and hundreds of thousands of years of human history, we're approaching this fork in the road, the most interesting juncture really of all, I would say, where we're either going to become empowered as a species to really be the masters of our own destiny and use artificial intelligence to solve all the problems we've been stumped by so far, help life flourish like never before, not just on Earth, but probably also out there in our vast cosmos. Or we're going to go extinct or get replaced by entities that don't really care about us and losing basically everything we've got. So this has made me incredibly motivated to think about this. About 7 years ago, I shifted my MIT research group over to doing AI research. Super fun. And it's also made me really motivated to help catalyze this conversation about where we're going to go in this fork. I think it's a really inspiring topic to talk about. It's not a depressing topic like nuclear weapons or something where either they get used, which really sucks, or we don't use them and it's kind of neutral. This is one where it's either going to go terribly bad or it's going to be incredibly inspiring, right? Better than our ancestors ever dreamt of. So really, really motivating. And I think what the risk is that we're just so eager to get all the upside that we rush a little too much and cut a few too many corners on safety. And because of that, we lose it all. We lose control over this whole business, because it's it is possible, I believe, for us to build machines that are way smarter than us and still either control them or make sure that they help us. After all, you and I have both lived in the presence of smarter beings ourselves when we were little kids. They were mommy and daddy, right? And that worked out quite well because their interests were aligned with ours. But it's not guaranteed by default, right? The woolly mammoths on Earth had to check out living with more intelligent beings, namely us. And have you ever seen any around?
No.
Didn't pan out so great for them. So let's put ourselves in the situation where if we build AI, we figured out actually how to keep it doing what we want or align with our goals, not make ourselves the woolly mammoths. And the problem we're having is that the research on that stuff, which I think will succeed if it's given enough time, is still lagging behind, the research aiming just to make it more powerful and earning us more money. That's why we called for the pause, in short, to make sure that we have enough time to actually get it right, get all the upside, not squander it.
Recently, I'm sure you've been watching the interviews of Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, who was at Google, and now he's left Google, I think, so he can speak freely or do more to maybe talk about the dangers of AI. But he came out and said it was too late for a letter like that. What is your response? And was the letter effective? I mean, we're still talking about it. So as a PR event, I got to take my hat off to you because that's what you want with something like that. So was the letter effective? Was it ever meant to get a pause, or was it really meant to get more attention on this topic?
My personal goal with the letter was actually to mainstream the conversation on whether we should pause or not, so that people felt comfortable having it. Because to be quite candid, many people I really respect in the field felt uncomfortable even suggesting it. It was almost like it was a taboo to suggest it because people might think you're some sort of weirdo, Luddite scaremonger who doesn't understand AI, right? And having people like Joshua Bengio, who shared the Turing Award with Hinton, right, for pioneering deep learning, signing it as signatory number one, saying, we should pause. What it really did, I felt, was make everybody else feel comfortable joining the conversation, whatever side they were on, which is why we've had so much conversation, since the letter. That's, to me, step one. The next step is to see, okay, where is that all going to go? But I think the reason we haven't seen a pause already, and the reason there is a lot of, in my opinion, corner cutting on safety, is not because the people leading the companies building them are somehow not concerned. In fact, even in the last month, I've spoken with Sam Altman and Greg Brockman, who lead OpenAI. I've spoken with Demis Hassabis from DeepMind. I've spoken with Dario Amodei from Anthropic, and so on, and Connor Leahy from Conjecture. All of these people are quite idealistic. They really want to use AI to make the world better, and they're all very mindful of the risks. I really tip my hat to Sam Altman for having the courage to acknowledge this very publicly. He said even quite recently that the worst case scenario is lights out for all of us, and all of these people have been conveying, this could certainly cause human extinction, just like the woolly mammoth went extinct when it had to deal with more intelligent, unaligned entities, right? The reason why we're still not paused, I think, is not because these are not good people, and it's not because they're stupid and don't understand the risks. It's because of what you referred to in the beginning, their Moloch, the demon that keeps pitting everybody against each other. It's if one company tries to pause alone, the only thing that's going to happen is they're going to get outcompeted by other companies, and probably even before that happens, the CEO who ordered the pause gets fired, right? This is not a new thing. Moloch, this division demon, you might call him, is someone we know well throughout human history. If you have overfishing, for example, so Canadian fishers collectively managed to make it so that there was suddenly 10 times less cod to fish. Why was that? Was it because the fishers were evil? No, of course not. But they all knew that if they didn't fish, everybody else was still going to keep fishing, and they had to take care of their family. Economists call that one the tragedy of the commons, and economists and others have written books and books and papers studying this at great length, how sometimes you can put people in a situation that brings out the best in them. You can also put people in situations that bring out the worst in them. You put people into the Hunger Games reality or whatever, Moloch in action. And in other words, all of these leaders of these companies, they need help to change their incentive structure so everyone can pause together. That's ultimately what the letter is about. So if the public opinion, if governments come in and say, hey, you folks need to become less like the Wild West and more like biotech, now everything changes to the better. Think about it. In biotech, right? Suppose a company says, we have this fantastic new vaccine. We're just going to start selling it in supermarkets before doing any safety testing. What do you think would happen? What do you think the government would have to say about that?
Yeah, they'd shut them down.
Yeah. And then if the company comes back and says, you government folks, this is so ridiculous. You government folks, you need to tell us how to make it safe. You need to tell us exactly what the government would be like, guys, go away. This is your responsibility to do the safety testing, to do the clinical trials, and present the FDA here in the US with evidence that it's safe. And if you can't do that, well, go back and work harder, This is how we should obviously have it also in all other fields, including AI, where if you're putting out a system which has potential to create harm, then it should be the responsibility of the companies to demonstrate that it's safe. That would end this race to the bottom. This is the way we combat Moloch. This is the way companies now are really incentivized to all work on AI safety enough that they can demonstrate the safety, which again is doable. It just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, your concept of Moloch is fascinating. And I mean, to quickly define it for people that don't know, and I'd love to go a little deeper on it, you might say that Moloch is a metaphorical term for irrational collective behavior. And I think you've said the evil thing about this monster is, even though everyone sees it and understands it, they still can't get out of the race, which is ultimately to the bottom, and potentially everybody's demise or the demise of resources. And this has happened throughout history. And this is something, I'd say it's pretty much your signature IP. And it happens in only certain situations.
I want to be clear. Moloch is not my idea. Yeah. Moloch is, first, the demon has been with us since the beginning of history, and there's been many wonderful things written about it. Scott Alexander wrote a fantastic piece on his blog Slate Star Codex called Meditations on Moloch. I would highly recommend. In religions around the world, the devil goes by many different names, and Moloch goes by many different names also. What I'm doing is just pointing out here that the real villain in this, the villains here are not the CEOs of the tech companies, it's not AI researchers, it's Moloch himself. That's who we're up against here. So, and as you said, I think your definition was really, really good. Everybody can see that we're being pitted against each other. Yet it's still rational for every one person to keep fighting against the other people in the race because it's set up that way. The only way we can all get out of the race is by collaborating with each other instead. And it's so that this doesn't sound too depressing. I think it might be worth just taking a minute to remind ourselves how we've successfully defeated Moloch in many other battles throughout history. You know, evolution, first of all, has built in a lot of collaboration mechanisms, not just in us, but in other animals too. Generally, animals that could kill each other because they have, like cats, for example, or lions, they have evolutionary instincts that inhibit them from fighting unnecessarily. We're the same. If two dudes get into a drunken bar fight, you know, and start having at it, you know, there's still this deep inhibition towards actually killing the other person. Because it turned out that the groups in evolutionary history that didn't have that inhibition got outcompeted with other groups that could get along better, right? Just gonna have a sip of water. And then early humans took this to another level. We invented gossip, which is also a great way to collaborate because now all the moochers and cheaters and liars start to get a personal incentive actually to be more collaborative. Because if they aren't, they start getting basically socially punished by others. And then when societies got even better and people started having to bigger, when societies grew and we ran into a lot of strangers we'd never met before, so that the gossip thing and the reputation thing didn't work, we invented a legal system to again defeat Moloch. So even if two strangers are dealing with each other, they know that if they kill each other or violate the contract or whatever that they sign, that's a bad idea just for them egoistically. So what it always does, this collaboration anti-Moloch strategies, it makes your personal incentives aligned with a greater good, right? So that's what we need to do here also. We need to make sure that the incentives with AI are aligned with a greater good. There's a lot of nerd research. We're doing some here at MIT where at the moment on how you can make machines have incentives, how you can make AI have incentives aligned with the owner's incentives. You also obviously have to make sure that the corporations that own the AIs have incentives that are aligned. That's where we're failing right now because they have an incentive to make money. If it were biotech, there would be all these regulations they have to meet, or actually, for that matter, almost any other industry. You know, if you're a car company, you have a lot of safety regulations. If you can't build a nuclear reactor on Trafalgar Square without first demonstrating to the British government, you know, that it's safe. It's actually AI that's the weird exception where there's no meaningful regulations at all, and that's just because it's the new kid on the block. Right, and policymakers haven't had time to catch up.
Right. You know, we've been following the blockchain industry for the last couple of years, and the common thing I've heard from AI people is that the government can't figure out how to regulate blockchain, and it's much, much simpler than AI. So does it have any chance of regulating AI as it continues to develop exponentially?
I think it does, because what the government can, I mean, obviously, we can't expect all our politicians to have PhDs in computer science, but they certainly can work with technical people from the field who are very eager to help. And in fact, just yesterday, the European Union, the European Parliament, if I'm correctly informed, voted yes for the EU AI Act that's been developed, which is the first really meaningful regulation in the West on AI. That's a huge step forward. And we just need to get a little more time for politicians and policymakers to catch up. This is another point of the pause, because if we just let the technology get driven by market forces to go as fast as possible, policymaking will never catch up. But if we can pause for 6 months and use those 6 months with people from industry, from academia, from policymaking, getting together and just establishing, okay, here are the safety standards. You have like an FDA, but not for drugs, but for AI. These are the safety standards. Now you can kick the ball back to the market and say, okay, everything you release has to be above this bar. If it's just some kid making a funny little computer game, there's no safety risk, so no change. But if it's about somebody releasing a system, an AI system that's going to control nuclear reactors, or just anything that has the potential for major harm, they are now forced to do their safety homework first and make a convincing case to the regulators that this is safe.
But that doesn't stop the covert development of that, either behind the scenes in a corporation or in a government or a intelligence agency or just a bunch of guys in a lab. And they could make advances that maybe you couldn't compare to like developing a drug, because those things could also do harm in the future. So what do you do about that? Or is that an issue?
Yeah. If this sounds depressing, let me see if I can inject some optimism here. Let's take something like crystal meth or synthetic opioids, fentanyl. These are actually pretty easy to manufacture. In fact, there are so many crystal meth labs in people's basements and here in the US that there's even TV series about it, like Breaking Bad, right? And because there's a law saying nobody is allowed to sell drugs that haven't been approved as safe. That means that it's also illegal for me to do it in my basement, kind of by default. It's not like the government has to make a special rule against Max making crystal meth in his basement. It's illegal, and because people know that, because there's a lot of stigma around it, that already makes a big difference. Of course, you're not going to stop everybody from trying to make crystal meth. But we have a lot of police efforts and other things to try to crack down on it. And what it immediately does, though, is it stops people doing it openly like it is now. Right now, someone can go and do fundraising for a huge company and raise $1 billion to do something equivalent, in my opinion, of in danger or worse than building a $1 billion fentanyl factory. And that's not going to happen at all anymore as soon as it's by default illegal, and you have to do the safety thing first. So I think if we can just start thinking of AI as not some sort of exception that gets exempt from all rules, but it has to behave like any other industry, like biotech, for example. Huge win across the board. It's going to take a while to crack down on very dangerous illicit bootleg stuff, right? Just like with crystal meth or other things. But at the end of the day, we're in a good position. You also mentioned another really great issue. What about governments doing things in secret? So let's look at biological weapons. There was a huge arms race in biological weapons in the 1960s between mainly the US and the Soviet Union. Then biologists got activated, kind of like AI researchers are now, warning about this and saying, hey, we don't want there to be a weapon of mass destruction that's so cheap that all our adversaries can afford it. And Matthew Messelson here at Harvard convinced Richard Nixon of this, and he convinced Brezhnev, and there was the international bioweapons ban. It's great. Now, after that, it's known that both the Soviet Union and the US cheated on the ban to various degrees. Did that make it a failure? Well, let's do an experiment. Can you, off the top of your head, think of any bioweapon attacks that have actually that you've read about in the newspaper, or anyone getting killed by bioweapons since for the last 50 years?
No, I'm sure there's a couple small incidents, but no, nothing major.
It's pretty amazing, actually. There were 2 examples of people killed by American and Russian bioweapons since then, but they were both own goals. The Russians secretly were doing some anthrax in Sverdlovsk, and it leaked out and killed a bunch of Russians. Maybe 10, maybe 30, something like that. But it didn't kill any Americans. And then some Americans were killed by anthrax when there was this guy who started mailing anthrax letters to a bunch of famous people. That was American-made anthrax that he had somehow gotten hold of. I'd say, all in all, it's a pretty good scorecard, right? 50 years, the superpowers only managed to hurt themselves a little bit. There were no billions who died from this. Why was that? Why was it that they didn't use it on a massive scale, even though they were cheating? Well, because the stigma was so huge. Because people had, on all sides, including the Americans and the Soviets, been saying this is disgusting bioweapons. It's absolutely gross, and we're not building them. It became viewed as disgusting, and the last thing either of the cheating superpowers wanted to do was admit that they had them, right? So every time there was a little conflict somewhere, proxy war in some place, they made this calculus, like should we start using bioweapons in Afghanistan or whatever and get a little edge? They always concluded, no, it's absolutely not worth it, revealing that we have them just for this relatively minor thing. And similarly, if anyone ever tried to go start a private biotech corporation, bioweapon corporation or something, I'm pretty sure that they didn't get very far with their investor pitches because the stigma was so large. And like, what good biology grad student is going to work on bioweapons when everybody thinks it's gross, right? So if we can start getting this kind of stigma against uncontrollable AI systems that could wipe out humanity, I think we'll be in exactly the same situation as with bioweapons. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be some interest from various clandestine efforts, etc. But most likely, the rest of us will never even know it because people aren't going to even use it.
But if I put myself in like Putin's shoes or Xi's shoes, I mean, just as a hypothetical, and I'm sure they might do the same thing to us if they were having a discussion, and say, okay, this doesn't necessarily have the stigma, and what if I could build an AI that would just be the cyber attack, to the max, and all of a sudden I'd watch America or Ukraine or whatever my enemy was, and everything would be shut down from an infrastructure standpoint, and there's no real stigma because there's not bodies in the streets. You might argue that we're a little ways away maybe from the AI stigma, and also with it developing so fast, maybe that stigma won't get there. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that argument?
Yeah, I think my answer to it is let's look at what the actual risks are of ending humanity here. That's not the risk that someone does some little cyber attacks and stuff. And you don't even need AI for that in particular. You can do better cyber attacks for sure with AI, but that's still fairly low tech stuff. The reason I am so motivated for doing the call is because the most powerful AI systems we are building now are on the cusp of artificial general intelligence that can outsmart humans at everything. This is something most people thought was only going to happen in 50 years or 30 years. And now Microsoft has a paper out talking about sparks of AGI, effectively saying that it's almost here. Maybe we'll get it this year, next year, in 2 years. Machines that could, in principle, do almost all human jobs, better than us. Some people think it'll take 10 years. Some people still think it's going to take much longer, but a lot of very serious people think we're almost there. And the issue with these things is that we right now don't understand hardly at all how they work. So if you ask, for example, why was it that GPT-J seemingly persuaded a Belgian man recently to commit suicide, or that another chatbot tried to convince the New York Times journalist to leave his wife, it was not because some engineer involved in building it was like, I'm going to mess with these people. No, it's just they had no idea it was going to do these things. They're gigantic black boxes. We had a big conference that I was the lead organizer of here at MIT just last weekend on exactly this. How can we understand how these actually work? There is a lot of momentum, a lot of progress in the field, but we're still largely clueless on these things. And if you're Putin, if you're Xi Jinping, or for that matter, if you're any powerful entity in the US, if you build a system which is vastly smarter than humans, and you have no clue how it works, and you're aware of the fact that we haven't figured out any way of making these systems safe for guaranteeing that they're going to do what we want, pressing the start button is basically like playing Russian roulette. And that's actually the last thing that a very powerful person would normally want to do, right? We should not think of the reason why the Chinese or the Russians or whatever avoid doing this is to try to do America a favor. The reason they would avoid pressing start on this is because they like, being in control. The Chinese government is just as interested in having control as any Western government, maybe more, you could even argue. So that's the reason why we currently don't need to worry much about that, I think. You can even see today which country has cracked down the hardest on their tech companies so far. Number one is actually China, because they feel quite concerned, and I think rightly so, that one of the Chinese tech companies is going to deploy some sort of giant, super powerful AI system that's going to do stuff that they don't understand. So it's in the self-interest, in other words, of the most powerful countries and their secret services, etc., to not do anything reckless. That's why the biggest threat right now, I think, is instead coming from the private market, where everybody is just trying to make more money. And you can make a lot of money on things in the short term, even if you don't understand how they work, and even if you can't control them.
You mentioned the artificial general intelligence, and yeah, that always used to be kind of the Kurzweil 29, but now when I speak to people like Ben Goertzel and Mo Gaudet and all these people, they're starting, like you said, to say it could be as close as 2 years away. And when that happens, now you have something that can do everything better than a human, and then if it can code and improve on itself, then it starts to become something even more out of control than the black box LLMs that we don't understand now. And
For sure.
In your mind, unchecked, what would the next 2 to 4 years look like? I mean, and again, I don't want to go dark, but like if it's unchecked, what do you think this progression looks like, and how does it change and expand and affect the world? I think that might be important for people to understand.
Yeah, I'm very humble about how hard it is to make tech predictions. I was wrong 7 years ago, and thinking that it was going to take much longer than it actually has to get to where we are now. It actually turns out that it's easier to get close to human level intelligence than we had thought. So what I'm going to say now comes with a great deal of humility, also huge uncertainties. But if things are completely unchecked, and if we're actually able to get true AGI, next year and 2 years, that can do even AI development as well as humans, then according to the Metaculus prediction site, metaculus.org, it'll take about 9 months or so until you get to superintelligence. And the idea there is that if you can, instead of having humans developing better AI, if you can let the AI do that, then you can have now a billion virtual computer scientists who don't need any salary except some electricity. You can greatly accelerate the process of this. And instead of doubling the capability on the human research and development timescale, of years, it might happen in double on a timescale of months or weeks or days or something like that. So you pretty quickly get from being limited by our ability to write software to being limited by the hardware we have. And then which I don't think is much of a limitation, because our code, our AI systems today the algorithms we use are, in my opinion, so dumb that one of the first things that'll happen is the AI system will figure out ways of doing much better with the hardware we have. Your brain can do so many things right now that GPT-4 cannot, and it uses 12 watts of electricity, right? like a very faint old-fashioned light bulb. That's how much better your software is than what these AI systems are. And then in a pretty short order, you can also start having, of course, the machines figure out how to make much better hardware. And then pretty quickly you start getting to systems that are so smart that they're limited just by the laws of physics, by what's possible. And there are also limits there. You can't send information through your AI faster than the speed of light. You can't pack in more. It's hard to put in much more than 1 bit of information per atom. If you try to put too much information processing too fast in a small space, there's so much energy there, it turns into a black hole. Professor Seth Lloyd at MIT worked all this out, and his answer is that you could do about a million times better than today, according to the laws of physics. So that's 1 with 30 zeros, which is way farther beyond, our human intelligence than we are beyond the cockroach. So you might end up then in the fastest kind of scenario within a matter of years, maybe 5 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, maybe 10 years, maybe go a little longer if you think tech is really hard. When we are like the cockroaches among these godlike intelligent entities that have been created. And this is this would be the culmination of a process that's been going on ever since life started showing up on Earth over 1 billion years ago, where things got more complex and smarter. And then, of course, gradually it's gotten faster and faster because we always use today's technology to build tomorrow's. We got the Industrial Revolution, things went faster. Now we're getting machines to help us with more and more. We're already having machines helping us write code faster than before with these co-pilot systems. And so then the question is that good for us humans, or is that bad for us? And I think by default, if we don't solve the safety problems first, it's obviously going to be bad for us. We can't compete with these things. So if we're forced to compete, we're going to lose. There won't be any humans. It's not like the machines would have anything particular against us. But like, why are there no mammoths left? Why have we chopped down half the rainforest? It's not because we hate trees. It's just that we had, other goals that weren't aligned so much with the denizens of the rainforest. And, it's just really inconvenient to have to share the planet with much more intelligent beings. And people sometimes ask me, like, how exactly would much smarter machines figure out how to kill off humanity? Well, I mean, if you ask a mammoth, or if you ask the black African rhinoceros why we humans drove it extinct, they couldn't have understood even how we would do it or why we would do it, right?
Right.
They would probably be like, we've not done anything mean to the humans. Why would they kill us? Well, how could they have possibly guessed that some humans thought that by eating ground up rhinoceros tusk horn that it was going to improve their virility, even though the medical journals disagree. How could they have guessed that, right? Or how could they guess that they were going to get killed by some fast-moving little piece of metal that came flying at them at high speed? When that wasn't even part of their world. If we're up against something more intelligent and it wants to get rid of us, it'll be in a way that we can't even imagine, and probably for a reason also that we can't imagine. The basic point is just, right now we still have it's within our power to decide whether we even want to build these things or not. And what I'm saying is incredibly simple. Let's not build them until we've convinced ourselves that it's gonna be good for us. People sometimes say, oh, it's inevitable, so we should just do it anyway. That's a conflation of is with ought. And the only reason seems inevitable is because people aren't aware enough of the cliff that we're driving from, right? It's not in the interest of hardly anyone on this planet, except maybe some tiny fraction of suicidal people who want to take the rest with us to do this. And I'm very hopeful that conversations like the one that we're having now can help people appreciate that really, A, it's not in our interest to rush ahead with this. B, of course we can stop it if people are just aware of what's happening. And C, I'm not sitting here saying that we should not get eventually all the great upsides of this either. I'm just saying if you have to wait one more year to make it safe so we can then enjoy it for billions of years, that's a pretty good idea.
I know. I mean, Max, when you say it that way, I mean, if you just zoom out, I mean, 1 year is nothing, 10 years is nothing, 100 years is really nothing to slow down in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you're talking about 1 or 2 years to AGI, 9 months or more to superintelligence, and then from there, there's no history on this planet of a less intelligent being ever either surviving or having any type of reality that they used to have. So there's a good argument to say this is really important to stay aware of. But
I agree.
But as humans, we've always been in the driver's seat. I mean, again, even as an ego challenging, destroying moment, and I try to destroy my ego whenever I get the chance. It's always good for perspective. But, you know, to come to humans and say, by the way, there's a new sheriff in town. You're going to be second-class citizens from now on. Your life is going to change. It's called the singularity. It's coming up. I mean, nobody can conceive of this. It would, you know, you've talked about that movie, Don't Look Up, right? Where it's like, I don't even think a human subconscious would allow it to see a reality that is so fearful and so, like I said, ego destroying. It probably will do everything to not see it. Do you think that's what's happening right now to a certain extent?
That's a very good point. There's probably a lot of wishful thinking. We are very good at not seeing things that are painful to see.
Yeah.
It's easier to do the ostrich thing and stick our head in the sand. I think another reason why we're missing it also is just because, you know, we've been in here for a long time and it's never happened before. Yeah. So it's so easy to assume it's always going to be this way. But we have to ask ourselves, you're completely correct. We have been the sheriff in town for a couple 100,000 years at least. Why is that? Is it because we have sharper claws and bigger biceps than all other animals? No, it's because we're the smartest ones, right? And we know that. And we're kind of proud of that, even to the point that we use that for the branding exercise for our species. We call ourselves Homo sapiens, the thinking Homo, right? That's why it should be quite obvious that if we build another species that can do the sapiens part better.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.
So Jim Rickards has just recorded a video that's not available to anyone in the public, and he's going to be talking about how this upcoming recession is going to be fast, it's going to be bloody, it's going to be nasty. But at the same time, he's going to show you how you can position yourself to profit from all of this chaos. Now, we've made this video only available to our viewers. Go to londonreal.tv/Jim. Watch that immediately. I can't say enough good things about Jim Rickards. He understands the global economic system better than any guest I've ever had on London Real. His predictions are almost uncannily true, and you can learn how to profit from his vision, from his expertise, and his understanding of economics. So go to londonreal.tv/Jim or click the link below. It's an excellent, excellent look on what's going to happen in the future and how you can position yourself to profit from that. Jim is one of the best in the business, one of my favorite guests on London Real. And he's very, very good at predicting the future and showing us all to profit from it. So click the link, and I hope you enjoy. Hey, it's Brian Rose, founder of the DeFi Academy. I've told you my 4-week crypto bootcamp is amazing, but don't take my word for it. This is what my students are saying.
The DeFi Academy was an amazing experience for me. It took me totally out of my comfort zone.
In this course, I was challenged, I was held accountable, and pushed to do things that honestly weren't always easy.
It's been phenomenal, and I can't believe we're already up on our 4 weeks. It has flown by.
Going through this DeFi accelerator by far was one of the best courses I've taken.
You do this course, you really get into the nitty-gritty of the activities that will make you comfortable with decentralized finance.
Thank you so much to Brian and everyone at London Real and the DeFi Academy for even putting together an amazing course like this.
Anybody else that wants to do it, please sign up. It is well worth the money.